Well, if you're an AEW diehard or just a casual, if not hardcore wrestling fan, and viewership numbers mean something to you, AEW jumped up to 711,000 views according to social media, according to those that are in the know. I'm trying to find out what word to say there, but it seems AEW, it's like for every good thing they do. For every moment, every situation that could give them all that momentum to just take it to another level. Apparently, for every gigantic step they take forward, they take 40 gigantic steps back. Yeah. And people are wondering why. What is going on? I mean, they have a great talent roster, there's no doubt. But unfortunately, some of that talent is injured. In fact, Pro Wrestling Unlimited today did a video that's something they do once in a while where they were, updating people on the injuries, for several, talents in all the companies across the globe, that they know of. And when you compare the injury list of WWE and TNA combined, AEW outshines them, unfortunately. Yeah. From what I saw, the injury list for AEW is I wouldn't say a lot bigger, but it's slightly bigger than both WWE and TNA's combined. It is. It is slightly bigger. And that's not a good sign. Because some of these people they have injured are either ready to go, like Keith Lee, Wardlow, and several others, and some are injured to the point that they just had surgery and they're not going to be ready to go to at least next year, or some got surgery last year but have yet to be put into the clear because maybe they want to make sure, or the doctors want to make sure, that they are at a very well 100%, to go. But whatever the case is, their injury list is slightly bigger than both WWE and TNA's combined. And that, again, that's not a good sign. It's not a good look, because basically what that would tell people is Tony Khan is allowing the talent to go out there and wrestle the style, that they're used to wrestling on the independents, but do it a lot harder. Or do things they normally wouldn't do if they were elsewhere. I mean, look, you can crap on WWE all you want, but the reason sometimes they bring people in that have already established themselves on, somewhat bigger stages, and then they put them through the developmental system like Evolve, NXT, you name it. The reason they do that is to get them accustomed to how things are done in the WWE landscape. Most importantly, how they can adjust their already established moveset to be more WWE-like. Like, you could still have, your moves that people know you for, but also kind of tone it down to where, you can risk less injury, if you know what I mean. Not saying WWE doesn't have injuries. I mean, they have a list, there's no doubt. But basically, in this case, you can have, you can have a lesser injury list, or a smaller injury list than what others would have. Put it that way. But point I'm getting at, this is why, again, crap on WWE all you want, this is why they have the developmental system. This is why they have Evolve. This is why they have NXT. This is why they now have the ID program. Basically, it allows talents to showcase what they can do, but as they get further along, the pipeline in WWE, the more they'll get to learn how things are done in WWE to keep them safe. In other words, like I mentioned, keeping the moveset, keeping the moveset basically, but kind of toning it down so where it's less, risk. There's a less risk factor for injury, if that makes any sense. But yeah, AEW, basically their injury list, and I'm not trying to say this to make fun of them or anything, but it's unfortunately a lot bigger than WWE and TNA's combined. And if I'm Tony Khan or anybody that works under Tony, and I'm in charge of like setting up matches and everything, what I need to do is I need to talk to the talent involved in the match, and I need to say, hey, I know you like to do these kind of things during your match, but maybe it's time to tone it down so you can not risk any more injuries. And hopefully whoever is in charge of the matches, putting them together, they do that. In the near future, saying, hey, look, of those reports, the comparisons and all that our talent injury list is a lot bigger than WWE's and all that and all these other places. You know what? Maybe it's time for you guys that you're back. Let's tone it down just a bit. Let's tone it down to where you're not risking, permanent injury or permanent career-ending injury. Hopefully somebody talks to these people when they get back, get back in the ring, start competing and all that. Basically they tell them to tone it down. Because, again, have probably the biggest injury list, unfortunately, in the business currently, with a talent pool that's considered one of the best, if not the best talent pool, in the business, that's not a good sign. Now, the other thing that, unfortunately, is getting criticized by the fans when it comes to AEW is the running of smaller venues. Now, some of the venues they are running, like the one they ran in Cleveland yesterday, isn't so bad. It isn't so, I guess you could say, small or intimate and all that. And it looked like, from what I understand, it sold pretty well. But that's mainly because I think they configured it to seat a certain amount of people. Because when you look on WrestleTix online, the seating is for a lot more. So when they configure it to seat, like let's say 5,000, 7,000, and all that, and it's a venue that could fit, maybe 6,000 more, or 5,000, 5,000 more, or whatever the case may be. When you see that, it makes you wonder, okay, it makes you wonder if maybe Tony is realizing, we could sell maybe 5,000 of these, but there's no way we're going to be able to do what we used to do, and that's basically sell out the whole venue. You got to wonder if Tony's starting to realize that, because if he is, that's normally not a good sign when the person running the place is starting to kind of acknowledge that, we can do these big venues, but we got to black out a majority of the arena and just focus on the lower section because, hey, that's going to get seen more on television. It makes you wonder basically if he's starting to realize that maybe his company's not in the position that it needs to be. You have to wonder that. You have to wonder that because what's interesting is when you compare ticket sales here in the States for the weekly live events of Dynamite and Collision, as well as even the pay-per-views will sell well. There's no doubt, especially if you let people know in advance where they're going to be, and you put the tickets on sale well in advance. They will sell well, but when you look at like the weekly events, depending on the venue, that's another story. But when they go internationally, they sell. I was just looking on WrestleTix earlier today, and the O2 Arena in London is nearly sold out for Forbidden Door. So my opinion is I think what Tony Khan needs to do, in my opinion, is focus more on having a lot of his pay-per-views internationally. That's what he needs to do. Look more, and it's not just his pay-per-views either. I think he should look next year into not just having more pay-per-views internationally, but also having some, Dynamites and Collisions more so next year than he's ever, thought of. Have more Dynamites and Collisions internationally, because if he can get, a sellout crowd at the O2 Arena for Forbidden Door, an event that's mostly AEW and not very Forbidden Door-like. I mean, the only Forbidden Door match that so far is going to be there or being booked is a four-way dance for the TBS Championship, where you're going to have Mercedes Moné defending against Alex Windsor representing AEW, and two other ladies, one representing New Japan Stardom, and another representing CMLL. Those are the only ones. Not the only ones, but that's the only match that's very Forbidden Door-like, I should say. That's, currently, booked for the show. Every other match is AEW versus AEW. Now, they could do MJF versus Mystico for the Light Heavyweight Championship. They could do that, and that would be a good a good match to have, and you could have Mystico win. And if you wanted to steal a page out of WWE's playbook, you have MJF lose the light heavyweight title to, you have him lose it, I should say, to Mystico, and then you have him cash in his contract later on, sign the contract, cash it in, and become world champion at the end of the night. You can do that. You can do that if you want. I think that'd be possibly a great direction they can go in to hopefully get themselves some momentum to, by having someone that actually will bring attention to your product, with your AEW championship around their waist. But we'll have to see what they do. But the only Forbidden Door match that feels Forbidden Door-like is that four-way dance for the TBS Championship. Now, with that said, though, again, I go back to that, and look, I go back to that O2 Arena chart from WrestleTix, and I'm like, if he focuses more internationally for his pay-per-views, and maybe more so than he ever has on his weekly shows like Dynamite and Collision, I think attendance-wise, 2026 could be huge for them. It could be, but that's something Tony needs to think about. I think that's something Tony needs to think about, because when you get down to it, I think Tony realizes that, AEW is not in the same, it's not in the same stratosphere anymore that it used to be. It's pretty much becoming, a falling star that's falling straight to earth and not for people to make a wish on. It's a falling star that's basically breaking up in the atmosphere till it's nothing. And if I'm Tony Khan, I still want this company to succeed. And I want to keep it on the TBS networks, on the TNT TBS networks, the Discovery Global networks of TBS and TNT. And by extension, HBO Max is under the Warner Brothers umbrella. If I want to continue doing that, then I have to focus on what I feel is going to, financially and attendance-wise, is going to bring my company back up to that next level. And internationally, internationally, I should say, those markets are the way to go. That's just my opinion. That those are the markets that he should look at and focus on in 2026. And another thing he needs to look at as well, and this is just me, but another thing he should look at as well going into next year, is he needs to look at not letting people have so much creative control. And because, whether people want to admit that or not, it is fact. It is fact. Mercedes has it. Adam Copeland has it. Christian Cage has it. John Moxley has it. The Hurt Syndicate MVP, Bobby Lashley, Shelton Benjamin have it. And MJF to an extent has it. This is something that you cannot let your talent have unless they truly earn it. And what I mean by truly earn it, I'm basically saying, people that go in there, dedicate themselves to the company, dedicate to themselves to the craft and the ring, but also dedicate themselves to listening to what people tell them and taking, the advice, or, taking the advice they're given, as well as also working with what they're given from a storyline perspective and a character developing perspective, taking that and working and running with it and making the best of it. Those are the kind of people that, in my opinion, that once they do that throughout their tenure in a company, no matter how long it is, those are the kind of people, in my opinion, that would have truly earned to have creative control. Now, you might say, well, Copeland's earned it for his tenure in WWE and all that. Yeah, but here's the thing. Copeland, if he would have stayed in WWE and they would have renegotiated his contract to stay, and they said, one of the things we're going to give you is creative control because you've earned it because of your time here, then that's a different story, because at least he understands that if he's going to book himself into certain story aspects and everything, he has to do it within the WWE system that's going to work for everybody, because if he oversteps its boundaries, they'll let him know. They can take that away from him. They can take it away from him as quickly as they gave it to him. Same with John Cena. John has creative control, whether people want to acknowledge that or not, but he is the kind of guy that doesn't abuse it. He's the kind of guy that will come out, do what the company asks him to do, but in turn, like let's say with his retirement tour, he'll request a certain amount, he'll request a certain array, I should say not amount, but a certain array of talent to work with, in his final year. For example, what we saw this past Sunday, Brock Lesnar. So he's earned that right. he's earned that right, you know. But if you transition from one company to another, you know, you don't. I'll be honest with you. My opinion, you do not just automatically have creative control handed to you. Because going from one company to another, that's basically, as crazy as it sounds, it's basically like your career starting all over again. That's what it is. Your career's starting all over again. So you basically just got to start from square one once again before you can earn that right. And Tony Khan, he's just saying like, hey, Copeland, glad to have you here. Have creative control. Hey, Mercedes, glad to have you here. Have creative control. Moxley, glad you signed with us to, you know, be a face of the franchise. Here, have creative control. Jericho, same thing, creative control. You know, MJF, I'm glad you decided to jump and, you know, come over to us instead of go to WWE. Here, have some creative control, creative input, whatever. You know, Hurt Syndicate, glad to have you guys aboard. Here, have creative control. It's like, sorry about that, but like I said, it's like, you know, sign the Hurt Syndicate. Here, glad to have you guys aboard. Have creative control. Tony Storm, you know, here, hi Tony, great to have you here. Oh, I love the timeless gimmick. Here, have creative control. It's like you look at this, and no matter how much contribution or how much they've contributed to your product, to your company, no matter how much they'll change the character, you know, give themselves a gimmick that, you know, just stands out, and basically if they go elsewhere or stand out there, they can take it with them. You know, it doesn't matter. You know, if you're coming from one place to another, your career is starting over. End of story. It's starting over, and you basically need to earn your right. Not just have it handed to you because you're the boss that's bringing you in. It's like, oh boy, I got John Moxley. Whoopee, whoopee, whoopee. Or, oh boy, I got Mercedes Moné. Ha 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 ha. You know, no. If you're truly a boss, you're truly in charge. You say, guys, I know you want creative control, but you're going to have to earn it. And here's the goals that you need to achieve before I can give it to you. And that's it. That's it. You know, that's what he should do, at least. You know, at least that's what he should have done, is have him, you know, obtain certain goals throughout their tenure in the company, and once they do, it's like, okay, now you've earned that creative control. Because when you read about the recent story, you know, that's coming out with the Hurt Syndicate, with Bobby Lashley and Shelton Benjamin and mostly MVP, basically them coming out and saying, no, we don't want to drop the belts to Jet Speed. We don't want to drop the belts to the Outrunners. We don't want to drop the belts to FTR, who potentially they're going to be facing a Forbidden Door and all that. We don't want to do that. We don't want to do this. We don't want to do that. You know, but we want to, you know, we want to get the tag team. We want to drop the belts to a young and up-and-coming tag team and all that. And it's like, what young and up-and-coming tag team? You basically buried everyone. And you're also saying you don't want to work with them. You know, it's like, what sense does that make? And the more the reports come out, especially from within the company, according to various sources, the more it once again makes Tony Khan look bad, because he's not stepping up to the plate and telling MVP, look, I'm your boss, and if I say you're dropping those belts to FTR, you're dropping them to FTR, whether you like it or not. So basically, the creative control aspect, if I'm Tony Khan, you know, I want to use 2026 as a bounce back year for me, I take the creative control card away from these talents. I say, you guys, I'd be gentleman, and if I'm Tony Khan, I'd be nice about it. I sit them down, I'd be gentleman about it, be nice about it, but say, and tell them, look, and this is, if I was Tony, I would, you know, I'd be a nice guy about it. I'd sit them down, you know, be very gentleman about it, and I would tell them, guys, unfortunately, I have to take your creative control powers away out of your contract, or your creative control card out of your contract. And if you're wondering why, it's because everybody feels, you know, like you know, they're not getting opportunities, that you're always putting yourselves over. You don't care about the talent. You don't care about the talent and all that. You don't care about being team players. So unfortunately, we've got to take these away from you guys. And hey, if you want them back, that's fine, but you got to earn them back by putting over the talent. You know, and if Tony wants to be nice about it and say it in that manner or something similar, then to me that works. You know, that works. You know, and to me that would work. You know, if he wants to be nice about it, say something similar to that perspective, it would work. I think it would work. Because I do think there are some talents that have creative control, not going to name who would be understanding of, okay, no problem, take the creative control, we'll earn it back. We'll put certain talent over. And I think if he's polite about it, he's polite about it. He's gentleman about it. He's nice about it, but very firm as well as a boss. I think it would work. I think some some may not like it, but they probably later on be understandable. Like, yeah, it was nice to have that creative control, but I guess I do have to put certain talents over before I can truly get it back. So, again, that's just me. That's just my opinion of what I think Tony should do going into 2026, along with focusing more on international markets. Taking his pay-per-views to international markets, taking his shows once a few quarters to these international markets, and all that, more so than he's had in the previous years. And if he does that, to me, I think 2026 could be a bounce back year for him, and AEW. And most importantly, with it being, I think what are they going into the final year of the current deal they have with Discovery Global, as it's going to turn out to be, and Warner Brothers. If I want to impress the Discovery Global people, which TBS and TNT fall under, then I base, as well as the Warner Brothers, which HBO Max falls under, then I definitely would focus more on that international market, venue wise and pay-per-view wise, because it'll not only financially sell out all the events and everything, but it's going to make me, if I'm Tony Khan and my company AEW, look a lot better, in the eyes of the people running Discovery Global and even Warner Brothers. Make it look a lot better and give me a better chance at remaining on their networks and on the streaming service going forward. But that's just the way I look at it. But yeah, he right now, AEW is not in the best shapes or anything, because again, as I said earlier, for every gigantic step they take, like they did with All In, they take like 40 to 50 gigantic steps backwards, and that's not good. And then when you have what Cody Rhodes said cryptically in his interview with Bill Simmons earlier this week, about how he felt disrespected in AEW, how he felt him and his wife Brandy were disrespected, and so on and so forth. And it's cryptically him talking about, Tony Khan, but not by name, and yet everybody can figure it out. That doesn't make Tony Khan and AEW look, any better than he wants it to be, or any better than what they're trying to be, right now. It makes them look even worse. So I look at it this way: if I'm Tony Khan, I want to get AEW back to what it was previously. I want to get it back to that feeling that that everybody says, hey, it once had, and and has shown signs of having, recently this year. If I'm Tony Khan, I use whatever momentum I can get coming out of, let's say, Forbidden Door, at the end of the month and everything. I take whatever momentum I get there and try to build upon it towards the end of the year to World's End, and then take that momentum, and use it to really, catapult AEW back to where it was, back to that feeling in 2026, by focusing mostly on the international side of things, for booking, my weekly shows as well as my pay-per-views. I focus internationally on those markets, as well as I also finally take charge, as a boss, and I basically sit down with those that I have given creative control, to, and I would, very nice, very firm, nice, gentleman-like, friendly way, take that, kind of make them understand that I'm going to take that away from them, and that the only way they get it back is if they put the talent, the younger talent, over, as they're supposed to be, basically be team players. So that's one of the things I would do if I'm Tony Khan going into next year, as well as I would sit down with talents. I would have an overall talent meeting, even with those that come back from injuries, and I would say, hey, we need to tone it down a little bit. We need to be more safer in the ring. So what that means is basically Whatever you like to do, full throttle, tone it down a little bit, save some of those big spots and moments for the pay-per-views where it's going to matter more so than anything. But, right now the state of AEW, for every gigantic step, like I said, they take 40 to 50 gigantic steps backwards. But, that's just my take on it, guys. Let me know what your thoughts are overall in the comment section below, as well as during the live chat during the premiere. Like the video, ring the bell for notifications, subscribe to the channel. Also click on the links in the description to find my content elsewhere outside of YouTube, as well as click on the link at the bottom to find my Teespring store and get merchandise you can't get anywhere else. And until next time, guys, let me know what your thoughts are on everything I've had to say here. And until then, I'm out.